The last thing I saw was my father's hand waving through the taxi window, and the realization that I was completely alone in a country I didn't know. Bangkok's morning heat slapped me across the face the second I stepped outside the hotel lobby. Sweat dripped down my spine as I clutched my phone, staring at the empty street where Dad's cab had disappeared 3 minutes ago. He said he'd be back by noon. He promised. But something in my chest twisted like a wrung-out towel, whispering that I'd just watched him leave for good. I called him. Straight to voicemail. Called his assistant, Rebecca. Nothing. Not even a text back. My fingers were shaking so bad, I nearly dropped the phone on the pavement. People rushed past me, speaking rapid Thai, their words flying over my head like birds I couldn't catch. I felt invisible. Erased. Dad and I had flown into Thailand 4 days ago for what he called the biggest deal of my career. International expansion. New investors. A chance for me to finally prove I belonged in his world. I'd spent 2 years earning my business degree, another year working under him, swallowing every dismissive comment, every "you're not ready yet" with a smile. This trip was supposed to be my breakthrough. Instead, it became my breaking point. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. I stumbled back into the hotel, my legs feeling like they'd been replaced with wet cardboard. The receptionist looked up with that polite smile hotel workers perfect over years of dealing with confused tourists. I asked if my father had left any messages. She checked the computer, her smile fading into something that looked like pity. Mr. Whitfield checked out this morning, miss. He settled both accounts. Both accounts. My stomach dropped through the floor. What about my return ticket? She clicked through screens, her face carefully neutral. I don't see a return reservation under your name. The lobby started spinning. I gripped the counter edge, my knuckles going white. That's impossible. We flew here together. We're supposed to fly back together next week. I'm sorry, miss. Would you like me to call someone for you? Who could she call? The man who'd just abandoned me? I shook my head and walked to the elevator on autopilot, my vision blurring at the edges. Inside my room, I tore through my suitcase looking for anything he might have left behind. A note. An explanation. Hell, I would have taken a post-it at that point. Nothing. I checked my email with trembling hands, half hoping for a frantic message saying he'd been in an accident, that this was all a terrible mistake. What I found was worse than silence. One message. Sent at 5:47 a.m. while I'd been asleep. The subject line was blank. The body contained exactly 12 words that would change everything. You're on your own now. If you're serious about business, prove it. Figure it out. I read it 3 times. Then 6. Then I lost count. Each time, the words hit harder, like stones thrown at glass, until something inside me finally cracked. He'd planned this. Waited until I was asleep. Packed his things quietly. Paid the bills. Canceled my ticket home. Left me stranded 8,000 miles from everything I knew with nothing but a challenge dressed up as cruelty. My phone buzzed. For one stupid, hopeful second, I thought he'd changed his mind. Instead, it was my bank app notification. My credit card had just been declined for a coffee I'd ordered that morning. I checked my account balance and felt the air leave my lungs. 0. He'd frozen my access to everything. I sank onto the bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning lazy circles overhead. The room suddenly felt enormous and suffocating at the same time. I had maybe $200 cash in my wallet. No return ticket. No working credit card. No family except the man who'd just thrown me away like yesterday's newspaper. My mother's face flashed through my mind, the way she used to smooth my hair when I was scared. But Mom was gone, dead from a stroke 2 years ago, and the man she'd loved had turned into someone I didn't recognize anymore. You're too soft, Emma, he used to say. The world eats people like you for breakfast. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was too soft, too trusting, too desperate for his approval to see what he really thought of me. Or maybe he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. I grabbed my laptop with shaking hands and opened it, pulling up the hotel's Wi-Fi. If he wanted me to prove myself, fine. I'd prove something all right. I searched for the nearest embassy, job boards, anything that could keep me alive long enough to figure out my next move. My eyes burned with tears I refused to let fall. Crying wouldn't pay for food. Crying wouldn't get me home. But anger? Anger could fuel something much more dangerous than tears. As the sun set over Bangkok, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold that would have been beautiful if my world wasn't actively collapsing, I made myself a promise. I would survive this. I would build something from nothing, just like he'd always bragged about doing. And one day, when I walked back into his world, he'd realize he hadn't tested me. He'd created his own worst nightmare. Do you think Emma should forgive her father, or make him pay for what he did? Drop your thoughts below. The panic hit me like a freight train at 3 a.m. I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might crack a rib. The hotel room was dark except for the neon signs bleeding through the curtains, casting red and blue shadows across the walls like some kind of nightmare disco. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything except grab my phone and dial his number again, knowing he wouldn't answer, but doing it anyway because what else was I supposed to do? Voicemail. Again. His voice smooth and professional, telling callers to leave a message. I wanted to scream into that recording. Instead, I hung up and called Rebecca, his assistant, for the 15th time. This time, someone picked up. Emma. Her voice was tired, guilty. I can't help you. Rebecca, please. Just tell me what's happening. Where is he? Why did he leave me here? Silence stretched between us like a chasm. Then, quietly, he told me not to take your calls.
I'm sorry.
I have to go. The line went dead. I threw the phone across the room and watched it bounce off the wall, a small crack spiderwebbing across the screen. Perfect. Just perfect. Now I'd destroyed the one thing connecting me to the outside world. I spent the next 2 hours curled up on the bathroom floor, the tiles cool against my cheek, trying to remember how to breathe. Mom used to say that panic was just fear wearing a mask, and the only way to beat it was to rip that mask off and look it straight in the eye. But Mom wasn't here anymore, and the fear looking back at me had my father's face. When morning finally crawled through the window, I forced myself to stand. My reflection in the mirror looked like something dragged from a swamp. Hair matted, eyes red and swollen, yesterday's clothes wrinkled beyond recognition. I splashed water on my face and tried to pull myself together. Falling apart was a luxury I couldn't afford anymore. The hotel staff pitied me. I could see it in their careful smiles, the way they avoided eye contact when I passed through the lobby. The breakfast buffet smelled like heaven, but I'd already burned through $40 on meals I barely touched. I had to start rationing the cash in my wallet like it was liquid gold. I found a small cafe 3 blocks away, where coffee costs less than $1. The owner, an elderly woman with kind eyes and hands weathered from years of work, watched me count coins with the desperation of someone doing mental math on survival. She slid an extra pastry across the counter without a word, shaking her head when I tried to pay for it. That small act of kindness broke something in me. I sat at a corner table and cried into my cheap coffee while Bangkok woke up around me, indifferent to my suffering. By noon, reality had sunk its teeth in deep. I needed a job. Fast. I walked into every business with an English spoken here sign, asking if they needed help. Most turned me away immediately. Tourist visa. No work permit. Legal complications. The words became a chorus of rejection that followed me down every street. Then I overheard 2 American tourists at a market stall complaining loudly about how nobody spoke English at their hotel. The vendor, a young woman about my age, looked exhausted trying to understand their demands. I stepped in without thinking, translating, smoothing things over. The tourists left happy. The vendor looked at me with something like relief. "You need job?" she asked in broken English. I nodded so hard I nearly gave myself whiplash. She pulled out her phone and made a call, speaking rapid Thai I couldn't follow. 5 minutes later, I had an address for a language center that needed English teachers. No promises, she warned, but they might overlook the work permit issue for the right candidate. Hope felt dangerous, but I grabbed onto it anyway. That evening, sitting in the cafe again, because I couldn't bear another night alone in that hotel room, I overheard something that made my blood run cold. Two Thai businessmen at the next table were speaking in English, their voices carrying over the ambient noise. Did you see Whitfield flew back alone? Left his daughter here, apparently. Typical Richard. Always testing people. Wonder if she'll pass. My hands clenched around my coffee cup, so hard I thought the ceramic might shatter.
They were talking about me.
About him. Like this was some kind of game, some corporate strategy everyone knew about except me. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and searched his name. There he was, smiling in a news article from yesterday. Richard Whitfield returns from successful Bangkok negotiations. The photo showed him at the airport back home, looking refreshed and confident. Not a single mention of me. Not one word about leaving his daughter stranded in a foreign country. The article talked about new deals, promising ventures, company growth. Whitfield Global was doing just fine. Better than fine. While I was counting coins for coffee, he was celebrating his success on camera, probably sleeping in his own bed, eating home-cooked meals, living his life like he hadn't just thrown mine away. Something inside me shifted then. The panic, the fear, the desperate hope that this was all some terrible mistake, it all burned away, leaving behind something harder, something colder, something that tasted like rage wrapped in determination. He wanted to test me?
Fine.
But tests work both ways. And maybe, just maybe, he just created the one thing that could destroy everything he'd built. His own daughter, with nothing left to lose and a whole lot to prove. Would you survive being abandoned in a foreign country, or would you crumble? Let us know in the comments. The teaching job saved my life, even if it paid barely enough to keep me breathing. Mrs. Prida, the language center director, looked me up and down like she was buying a used car. Her office smelled like jasmine tea and old paper, certificates covering the walls in neat rows that screamed legitimacy. I sat across from her in my least wrinkled outfit, trying to look competent instead of desperate, knowing I was failing miserably at both. You have teaching experience? Her English was crisp, perfect. I tutored in college. True, if you counted helping my roommate pass English 101. Work permit. I can get one. A lie that tasted like acid. She studied me for a long moment, her eyes too sharp, seeing right through my polished-up desperation. Then she sighed, pulling out a contract. Cash only. Under table. You understand. I understood that she was breaking rules to help me, and I'd have kissed her feet if it wouldn't have been wildly inappropriate. Thank you. I won't let you down. No, she said firmly. You won't. Because if immigration comes, you were never here. The job was brutal. 5 classes a day, teaching English to everyone from giggling kindergartners to exhausted businessmen who fell asleep during lessons. My feet ached, my voice went hoarse, and I collapsed into my new shoebox apartment every night feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. But that paycheck, thin as it was, meant I could eat, meant I could stay, meant I wasn't completely powerless anymore. The apartment I found was in a neighborhood where tourists never ventured. 4th floor walk-up, one room with a bathroom the size of a closet, a hot plate for cooking, and a fan that sounded like a helicopter having a seizure. But it was mine. $40 a week, paid in cash to a landlord who didn't ask questions as long as the money showed up on time. I learned to eat street food. Pad Thai for $1, mango sticky rice for dessert on good days. I learned which vendors gave you more food if you smiled right, which streets to avoid after dark, how to say thank you and how much and please help me in Thai. The language came slowly, painfully, but it came. Bangkok stopped feeling like a prison and started feeling like a possibility. 2 months in, Mrs. Prida introduced me to someone who would change everything. This is Kunananda, she said, gesturing to an older Thai man in an immaculate suit. He funds our center. Wants to meet our foreign teachers. Ananda's handshake was firm, his smile genuine. We talked for hours that first day, him asking questions about America, about business, about what brought me to Thailand. I told him everything. Not because I wanted to, but because something about him felt safe, like confessing to a grandfather who'd already seen every mistake humans could make and forgave them all anyway. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that made my chest tighten. Your father didn't abandon you. He gave you a gift. I laughed bitterly. Some gift. The gift of necessity. Of being forced to become who you really are, instead of who he wanted you to be. He leaned forward. You're angry. Good. Use that anger. But don't let it use you.
He offered to mentor me.
No charge, no strings. Just knowledge passed from someone who'd built his success on respect instead of intimidation. We met twice a week at his office, a modest space above a silk shop. He taught me about Thai business culture, about patience and community, about seeing partnerships as relationships instead of transactions. In the West, you take, he explained. In the East, we cultivate. Like a garden. You don't rip vegetables from the ground. You water them, tend them, wait for them to grow. It was everything my father had never taught me. 3 months into my new life, something interesting happened. One of Ananda's business associates, a woman named Nak who ran an export company, mentioned she'd worked with Whitfield Global years ago. Your father, she said carefully, is not popular here. My ears perked up. Why not? He promised partnerships, took our money, delivered nothing. Many investors here, they remember. They don't forget. She introduced me to others. A whole network of Southeast Asian businesspeople who'd been burned by Richard Whitfield's promises. They were cautious at first, suspicious that I was his spy. But when they realized I was genuinely trying to learn, trying to build something real, their attitudes shifted. One evening, after a particularly good class where my students actually laughed at my jokes, I found Nok waiting outside the center. She looked nervous, excited, like she was holding a secret too big for her skin. I have something to show you. She handed me her phone. It was a news article. Whitfield Global faces investor backlash. Broken promises in Asian markets. My father's company was bleeding. Not dying, not yet, but wounded. And these people, the ones he'd dismissed and forgotten, they were the ones twisting the knife. Nok watched my face carefully. We thought you should know. Some of us, we think maybe you're not like him. I'm not, I said quietly. Good. She smiled, sharp and knowing. Because we might have work for you. Real work. If you're interested. I looked at the article again, at my father's face in the thumbnail photo, his expression caught between anger and panic. For the first time since he'd left me here, I felt something other than fear or rage. I felt power. I'm very interested, I said. Nok's smile widened. Then maybe you trust us more than your father ever did. And maybe, Miss Emma, that trust is worth more than all his broken promises. She walked away, leaving me standing under the Bangkok streetlights with a phone full of possibilities and a heart full of something dangerous. Revenge?
No.
Not quite. Something better. Justice. Is Emma wrong for working with her father's enemies? Or is this just smart business? Drop your thoughts below. The partnership offer came 3 weeks later, wrapped in possibilities I'd never dreamed of when I was counting coins for coffee. Nok's export company needed someone who understood Western markets, but respected Eastern values. Someone who could bridge the gap between cultures without trampling either one. Someone who, apparently, looked exactly like me. The pay was modest but regular. More importantly, it was legitimate. A real work permit, a real contract, a real future. I said yes before she finished explaining the benefits package. The work itself was fascinating in ways my father's business never had been. Instead of hostile takeovers and aggressive negotiations, I learned about building relationships slowly, carefully, like Ananda had taught me. I helped Western startups understand why their pitches failed in Asia. I showed Thai businesses how to present themselves to American investors without losing their identity. And I was good at it. Really good. Within 2 months, small companies started requesting me specifically. Word spread through Bangkok's business community about the young American woman who actually listened, who didn't treat Asian partners like stepping stones to profit. My calendar filled up. My bank account stopped looking anemic. I moved into a better apartment, one with a shower that had hot water more than twice a week. For the first time since my father's taxi had disappeared down that Bangkok street, I felt like I could breathe. Ananda watched my progress with quiet pride. You're learning fast, he said during one of our mentorship sessions. Faster than I expected. I have good teachers. I meant it. Every person I'd met here, from the cafe owner who'd given me free pastries to knock to Ananda himself, had taught me more about real success than my father's entire empire ever had. Your father's investors, Ananda said carefully, they're starting to notice you. My coffee cup paused halfway to my lips. What do you mean? The ones he disappointed. They ask about you. They want to know if you're available for consulting work. He studied my face. They see you as trustworthy. As someone who understands both worlds. Something electric ran down my spine. And, you think I should work with them? I think, he said slowly, that you should do what feels right. But know this, the business world is small, Emma. Especially at the international level. Every choice you make ripples outward. That night, I lay awake in my apartment, the fan rattling overhead, thinking about ripples, about consequences, about the fact that the same investors my father had burned were now reaching out to me directly, quietly, like they were testing whether Richard Whitfield's daughter had inherited his worst traits or something better. The first official consulting request came from a Singapore-based firm that had lost $2 million on one of my father's guaranteed returns schemes. They wanted advice on a Thai market expansion. I took the meeting, hands shaking, knowing this was a line I was about to cross. Their CEO, a sharp woman named Dr. Lin, didn't waste time on small talk. Your father cost us dearly, Miss Whitfield. Why should we trust you? Because I'm not him, I said simply. And because I actually care about building something that lasts, not just grabbing money and running. She studied me for a long moment. Then she smiled. Show me. I showed her. I put together a proposal that prioritized sustainable growth over quick profits. I introduced her to Ananda's network, to people who could help her company succeed long-term instead of just bleeding her dry. I worked harder on that single project than I'd worked on anything in my life, knowing it was my one shot to prove I was different. When Dr. Lin's expansion succeeded, exceeding every projection, my phone started ringing off the hook. More investors. More burn partners. More people who'd trusted Richard Whitfield once and wouldn't make that mistake again, but might be willing to take a chance on his daughter. I launched EW Consulting on a shoestring budget, operating from a borrowed desk in Knox's office. Emma Whitfield Consulting, though I thought about dropping the Whitfield part entirely. Ananda talked me out of it. Let them know exactly who you are, he said. Let them see that the name can mean something different. Something better. He was right. The name drew attention, but my work kept it. Within 6 months, I had a small team, an actual office, and a reputation for honest dealing that spread faster than gossip at a family reunion. And somewhere in all of that success, I started hearing things. Whispers through the business grapevine about Whitfield Global, about bad deals, about investors pulling out, about my father scrambling to keep his empire from imploding. At first, I told myself it had nothing to do with me. His problems were his own, earned through years of treating people like disposable assets. But then I realized something that made my hands go cold. Some of those investors pulling out, they were redirecting their money through me, to ethical projects, to sustainable ventures, to everything my father's company wasn't. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was quietly, methodically, taking away his power. One afternoon, my email pinged with a message from an address I didn't recognize. No subject line. I almost deleted it as spam before curiosity made me click. The message was short, typed in all caps like someone shouting through a screen. Whitfield Global under government investigation for tax fraud and financial mismanagement. Thought you should know. My heart hammered against my ribs. I searched his company name and found it everywhere. Headlines screaming scandal. Articles dissecting his business practices. Photos of him looking haggard, cornered, desperate. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered without thinking. Emma. My father's voice, rough with exhaustion and something that might have been fear. What the hell have you been doing? I should have felt triumph. Should have felt vindicated. Instead, I just felt tired. Building something real, Dad. You should try it sometime. You're working with them, aren't you? The people trying to destroy me. No, I said quietly. I'm working with the people you destroyed. There's a difference. He started to say something else, but I hung up. My hands were shaking so badly, I had to set the phone down before I dropped it. Knock appeared in my office doorway, her expression unreadable. That was him. I nodded. And he knows. I looked at her, really looked at her. He knows what we're doing, what I'm doing. She came into the office, closing the door behind her. Are you scared?
Was I?
I searched myself for fear and found something else instead. Something harder, colder, more determined than anything I'd felt before. No, I said. I'm not scared anymore. Knock's smile was small but fierce.
Good.
Because tomorrow, we have a meeting with the Singapore Investment Council. They want to redirect $12 million from Whitfield Global into sustainable Asian ventures. Through us. $12 million. The number hung in the air between us, like a promise and a threat. He'll fight this, I said. Let him. Knock's eyes gleamed. You're not the desperate girl in the hotel lobby anymore, Emma. You're a businesswoman with integrity, connections, and a reputation that's worth more than all his money. Let him fight. You've already won. The power shift happened so quietly I almost didn't notice it at first, like watching ice melt, each drop insignificant until suddenly the whole structure collapses. EW Consulting grew faster than I'd ever imagined possible. What started as me and a borrowed desk turned into a team of 8, then 12, then 20. We moved into real office space in Bangkok's business district, glass walls and modern furniture that made me feel like I was playing dress-up in someone else's life. Except it wasn't dress-up. This was mine. Every contract, every successful deal, every client who chose integrity over exploitation, it was all mine. The Singapore Investment Council deal went through. $12 million redirected from Whitfield Global into sustainable Asian ventures, every penny flowing through our firm. Dr. Lin became not just a client, but an advocate, introducing us to her network, opening doors my father's name alone never could have. More followed. A Malaysian tech consortium, a Vietnamese manufacturing group, a coalition of Thai agricultural exporters. All of them had one thing in common. They'd been burned by Western companies promising the moon and delivering dust. They were done being exploited. They wanted partners, not predators. And somehow, I'd become the bridge they'd been looking for. Ananda watched it all with quiet satisfaction. You're doing what I hoped you would, he told me over tea one afternoon. Building trust instead of taking advantage of it. I learned from the best. I said, meaning him, meaning Nak, meaning every person in Bangkok who'd shown me that success didn't require cruelty. Your father is losing control, Ananda said carefully. You know this, yes? I knew. I'd been following the news obsessively, watching Whitfield Global stock price drop like a stone in water. The tax fraud investigation had uncovered years of shady dealings, offshore accounts, payments to officials that definitely weren't legal. His board of directors was in chaos. His employees were jumping ship like rats fleeing a sinking vessel. And through it all, my phone kept ringing with investors who wanted nothing to do with him anymore but everything to do with me. I'm not trying to destroy him, I said, though even as the words left my mouth, I wondered if they were true. Aren't you? Ananda's eyes were kind but unflinching. Every client you take is one he loses. Every dollar redirected is power shifting from his hands to yours. You may not have started this wanting revenge, Emma, but you're getting it anyway.
Was I?
It didn't feel like revenge. Revenge was supposed to feel sweet, satisfying, like finally getting even. This just felt like watching someone self-destruct in slow motion, knowing you could stop it but choosing not to because they'd never stopped for anyone else. The anonymous email came 3 months later, right as I was finalizing a deal with a Hong Kong investment firm. He knows what you're doing. Be careful. My blood went cold. I showed it to Nak, who'd become more than a mentor, more like an older sister who understood the complicated mess of emotions swirling in my chest. Could be a threat, she said, frowning at the screen. Could be a warning. From who? She shrugged. Someone who cares about you. or someone who wants to scare you. Only one way to find out. Which is, keep doing what you're doing. If he comes for you, let him. You're not defenseless anymore. She was right. I wasn't the desperate woman counting coins in a Bangkok cafe. I had resources now, connections, a reputation that opened doors and kept them open. I had built something real, something that didn't depend on intimidation or exploitation to survive. But knowing you're strong and feeling strong are two different things. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my father, about whether he knew exactly what I was doing or just suspected, about whether he was proud, somewhere deep down, that I'd survived, about whether any part of him regretted leaving me here. Probably not. Richard Whitfield didn't do regret. The government investigation intensified. News broke that Whitfield Global had been cooking books for 5 years, hiding losses, inflating assets, lying to shareholders. The kind of fraud that didn't just cost you money. The kind that landed you in prison. My phone rang at 2 a.m. Dad's number. I stared at it for 3 rings before answering. Did you do this? His voice was raw, stripped of its usual confidence. Did you report me? No, I said honestly. You did this to yourself. Don't give me that moral high ground garbage. You're working with my enemies. You're stealing my clients. You're actively trying to destroy everything I built. I'm building my own thing, I corrected. The fact that it's costing you everything isn't my fault. It's consequence. He laughed, bitter and broken. Consequence. That's rich coming from the girl who couldn't survive a week without my money. You're right, I said softly. I couldn't survive a week without your money. So I learned to survive without it. Without you. And turns out, I'm better at this than you ever were. Silence stretched between us, 8,000 miles and a lifetime of disappointment filling the space where love should have been. You'll regret this, he finally said. When I come back from this, when I rebuild, you'll regret turning against family. Family doesn't abandon each other in foreign countries, I said.
You're not my family anymore, Dad.
You're just a cautionary tale about what happens when you confuse fear with respect. I hung up before he could respond. The next morning, I received an invitation that changed everything. The Bangkok International Business Forum wanted me to speak on a panel about ethical international partnerships. The kind of panel that attracted major media attention. The kind of panel that would put my name and face everywhere, establishing me not as Richard Whitfield's daughter, but as Emma Whitfield, independent businesswoman. I accepted immediately. Knock found me in my office that afternoon, staring at the invitation like it might explode. You're doing it? I'm doing it. He'll see it. He'll know exactly what you've become. Good, I said and meant it. Let him see. Let him know that the daughter he threw away built something better than he ever could. Let him choke on it. She smiled, fierce and proud. There's the Emma I know. But alone that night, staring at Bangkok's glittering skyline from my apartment balcony, I felt something twist in my chest. Not regret. Not exactly. Just the strange, hollow realization that I'd spent so long fighting to prove myself to him that I'd almost forgotten to prove anything to myself. The girl he'd left behind was gone. The woman who'd replaced her was stronger, smarter, more capable than he'd ever given her credit for. But she was also harder, colder, driven by spite as much as ambition. Was that who I wanted to be? Or had my father's abandonment shaped me into something I never intended to become? I didn't have an answer. Not yet. But as I looked at the city that had saved my life, that had taught me to survive and then to thrive, I made myself a promise. Whatever I became, whoever I turned into, it would be on my terms. Not his. Never his again. And if that meant watching his empire crumble while mine rose from the ashes?
So be it.
Some lessons have to be learned the hard way. And Richard Whitfield was about to get the education of his lifetime, taught by the daughter he'd underestimated.
Taught by me.
The message from my father arrived exactly 3 minutes after my face appeared on the Bangkok Business Network's morning broadcast. I'd expected anger. Maybe threats. Legal action. Instead, what I got was 3 words that made my stomach drop. You think you're clever. You're still nothing without me. I stared at my phone, sitting in my office with morning coffee going cold in my hands, and felt something snap inside me.
Not break.
Snap into place, like a puzzle piece finally finding its home.
He still didn't get it.
After everything, after watching me build a company from nothing, after seeing his own empire crumble while mine flourished, he still thought I was nothing.
Fine. Let him think that.
Let him underestimate me one more time. I didn't reply, didn't dignify his message with a response. Instead, I forwarded it to my lawyer, a brilliant woman named Sarah Chen who'd been helping me protect my assets from any potential fallout. She called within minutes. Emma, this could be construed as harassment or desperation, I said. He's watching me succeed while he's drowning. This is what drowning looks like. Be careful, Sarah warned. Desperate people do desperate things. She was right to worry. Over the next week, things escalated fast. My father hired a PR firm to paint me as a traitor, a disloyal daughter who'd turned against her own family. Articles started appearing in business journals, questioning my ethics, suggesting I'd stolen his clients through manipulation rather than merit. It might have worked if I'd actually stolen anything. But every client I had came to me willingly, choosing integrity over his brand of cutthroat capitalism. When journalists started digging, they found the truth. Richard Whitfield's daughter wasn't destroying his legacy. His legacy was destroying itself, and I just happened to be building something better in the wreckage. Ananda found me in my office late one night, stress-eating pad thai and going through legal documents until my eyes crossed. He sat down across from me without asking permission, his expression grave. You need to go home, he said. I looked up, startled. Thailand is home now. No, he said gently. You need to go back to America. Face him. End this. Why would I do that? Everything I've built is here. Everything you've built will follow you anywhere, Ananda corrected. But this war you're fighting? It's poisoning you. I can see it. Every day, you're a little harder, a little colder. You're winning, Emma, but you're losing yourself in the process. His words hit harder than I wanted to admit. I'd been so focused on proving myself, on building my empire while watching his crumble, that I hadn't stopped to ask what it was costing me. Sleep?
Gone. Peace?
Forgotten. The simple joy I'd found in helping businesses grow? Buried under layers of spite and vindication. What if I go back and it changes nothing? I asked quietly.
Then you'll know, he said.
But staying here, fighting from a distance, it will never give you closure. Only exhaustion. A journalist named Marcus Webb reached out a week later, requesting an interview for a major business publication. He was writing a piece on the Whitfield scandal, and he wanted both sides of a story. My father had refused to comment. Would I? I almost said no. Then I remembered Ananda's words about closure, about ending this war before it consumed me completely. I agreed to the interview, but only if it focused on EW Consulting's work, not my personal drama. Marcus showed up with a recorder and too many questions. We talked for 2 hours about ethical business practices, about building trust across cultures, about sustainable growth versus exploitation. It was good, professional, exactly what I wanted. Then he asked the question I'd been dreading. Your father claims you orchestrated his downfall out of revenge for being left in Thailand. Is there any truth to that? I chose my words carefully. My father made his own choices. The tax fraud, the shady deals, the burned investors, none of that was my doing. I simply gave those investors an alternative. A better option. If that cost him everything, maybe everything he had wasn't worth keeping. Do you regret how things turned out? Did I? I thought about the girl crying in that Bangkok cafe, about the months of struggle and fear, about building something real from absolute nothing, about becoming someone I was proud of, even if the journey there had been brutal. No, I said finally. I don't regret it. But I do regret that it had to happen this way. That he couldn't just see me as capable without forcing me to prove it through survival. The article came out 3 days later. It was fair, balanced, and devastating to my father's reputation. Not because of anything I said, but because the facts spoke for themselves. Whitfield Global was under investigation for fraud. EW Consulting had a spotless record and growing influence. The contrast was damning. That's when things got really ugly. My father called at midnight, drunk and furious. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Maybe curiosity. Maybe the same instinct that makes you slow down to look at car accidents. "You destroyed me," he slurred. "My own daughter. You've destroyed me." "No, Dad," I said, suddenly exhausted. "You destroyed yourself. I just refused to go down with you." "I made you," he shouted. "Everything you are, you owe to me." "You're right," I said quietly. "You made me. You left me in a foreign country with nothing, and you made me strong enough to survive it. You made me ruthless enough to compete. You made me angry enough to succeed.
So, thank you.
This is all your creation." The silence that followed was so long I thought he'd hung up. Then, barely a whisper, "I didn't think you'd actually do it. Actually make it without me." "I know," I said. "That's why you lost." I hung up before he could respond, my hands shaking, tears I didn't expect streaming down my face. Knock found me like that, crying in my office at midnight, and just held me while I sobbed out months of rage and pain and complicated grief for the father I'd lost long before he left me in Bangkok. "You need to go home," she said, echoing Ananda's words. "End this face to face." "I can't," I whispered. "You can," she said firmly. "Because you're Emma Whitfield, and you don't run from anything anymore." She was right. I'd been running for months, hiding behind business success and ocean distances, afraid to face the man who'd broken my heart and forged it into something stronger in the same breath. The next morning, I booked a flight to New York. One way. Because whatever happened when I got there, I wasn't running anymore. I was going home to finish what he'd started. And God help him when I did. Have you ever had to confront someone who hurt you? How did it go? Share your story in the comments. 6 months after my father abandoned me in Bangkok, I walked back through the arrivals gate at JFK Airport, and nothing felt the same. The city I'd grown up in looked smaller somehow, like I'd expanded, and it had stayed the same size. The buildings were still tall, the people still rushed, but I moved through it all with a confidence I'd earned the hard way, one survival instinct at a time. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. Not friends. Not former colleagues. Definitely not him. I wanted the element of surprise, wanted to see his face when I walked back into the world he thought I'd never navigate alone. My hotel was in Manhattan, close enough to Whitfield Global Headquarters that I could walk there if I wanted. I didn't want to.
Not yet.
First, I needed to meet with the people who'd helped make this moment possible. Sarah Chun, my lawyer, met me for breakfast the next morning. She slid a folder across the table before I'd even ordered coffee, her expression caught between impressed and concerned. "This is everything," she said. "The acquisition papers. The board votes. The financial projections. It's all here, Emma. You actually pulled it off." I opened the folder with shaking hands. Inside were documents that represented months of careful maneuvering, of building alliances with investors who'd lost faith in my father's leadership. Documents that showed EW Consulting, along with a coalition of international partners, had purchased controlling shares of Whitfield Global. I own my father's company. Or would, once the final signatures went through. "The board meeting is tomorrow," Sarah continued. "They're expecting a representative from the acquisition group." "They're not expecting you." "Good," I said, though my voice sounded distant to my own ears. "Let's keep it that way." That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in months. I drove past my childhood home, the massive house in Westchester, where I'd grown up trying to earn a man's approval that never came.
It looked exactly the same.
Perfect lawn. Perfect paint. Perfect facade hiding all the imperfect reality inside. My father's car was in the driveway. Not the sleek Mercedes he used to drive, but something older, dented. The for sale sign on the front lawn told me everything I needed to know about how far he'd fallen. I didn't stop. Didn't knock. Just drove past, letting the memories wash over me without drowning in them. That house wasn't home anymore. Home was the tiny Bangkok apartment where I'd learned to survive. Home was Ananda's office above the silk shop. Home was anywhere I'd built with my own hands instead of inheriting from his cruelty. The Whitfield Global building looked different too. Smaller. Less imposing. Or maybe I was just bigger now, too big to be intimidated by glass and steel and the ghost of who I used to be. I walked into the lobby wearing a suit I'd bought in Bangkok, tailored perfectly, costing less than half what my father used to spend on his. The security guard didn't recognize me. Why would he? The last time I'd been here, I was a nervous girl trying to prove herself. Now I was a woman who'd already proven everything that mattered. The elevator ride to the top floor felt eternal and instantaneous at once. My reflection in the polished door showed someone I barely recognized. Confident.
Composed.
Dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with cruelty and everything to do with competence. The executive floor was chaos. People rushing, phones ringing, that particular brand of panic that comes when a company is circling the drain. Nobody stopped me. Nobody asked who I was. They were too busy trying to save their own careers to notice the ghost walking through their halls. That's when I saw him. My father, standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, his back to me. He looked smaller than I remembered. Shoulders hunched, hair grayer. The king of his empire, reduced to a man watching his kingdom burn. I almost left, almost walked away and let the board meeting tomorrow deliver the final blow. But Ananda's words echoed in my head. End this face to face.
Dad, I said.
He spun around, his face cycling through shock, disbelief, anger, and something that might have been fear in rapid succession. Emma, what are you doing here? Visiting, I said calmly. Thought I'd see how you were doing. He laughed, bitter and broken. How I'm doing? Look around. This is how I'm doing. The company's falling apart. I'm being investigated and apparently, you've decided to make a career out of stealing my clients. I didn't steal anything. I corrected. They left you willingly. There's a difference. Because you poisoned them against me. No, I said quietly. You did that yourself. I just gave them an alternative. He moved toward me, and for a second, I saw a flash of the father I'd once known. The one who'd taught me to ride a bike. The one who'd held me when Mom died. The one who'd existed before success had turned him into something cold and calculating. Where the hell have you been? His voice cracked. 6 months. 6 months without a word. Surviving, I said. Like you told me to. Figuring it out. Proving myself. Isn't that what you wanted? I wanted you to come home, he shouted. I wanted you to realize how hard this world is and come back ready to actually listen to me. No, I said, something crystallizing in my chest. You wanted me to fail. You wanted me to come crawling back, broken and desperate, ready to accept whatever scraps of approval you'd throw my way. But I didn't fail, Dad. I succeeded. Without you. Despite you. Because of you. He stared at me, breathing hard, and for the first time in my life, I saw him clearly. Not as a titan of industry. Not as an impossible standard I'd never reach. Just as a man.
Flawed. Scared.
Incapable of showing love in any way that didn't involve tests and cruelty. You think this makes you better than me? He asked quietly. No, I said honestly. It makes me free from you. The elevator dinged behind me. Voices floated down the hallway, security probably coming to see what the commotion was about. I had maybe 30 seconds before this moment shattered. There's a board meeting tomorrow, I said. You should be there. Why would I go? They're voting me out, giving control to some coalition of investors I've never even heard of. I smiled, small and sad. You've heard of one of them. Understanding dawned in his eyes slowly, like watching sunrise through storm clouds.
No.
You didn't. I did, I said. EW Consulting, along with several partners, purchased controlling shares of Whitfield Global. The board votes tomorrow on new leadership. And Dad? They're voting for me. His face went white, then red, then something beyond color, beyond expression, into pure shock. You bought me out? No, I said softly. You sold yourself out long before I got here. I just made sure the company survived your ego. Security arrived, two guards looking confused about whether to escort me out or him. I turned toward the elevator, then paused. Tomorrow, Dad. Be there. I want you to see what I built from the nothing you left me with. I walked away, leaving him standing in the ruins of his empire, and for the first time since Bangkok, I felt something other than anger or spite or that driving need to prove myself. I felt peace. What would you say to someone who abandoned you, if you had the chance? Tell us in the comments. The boardroom felt like a courtroom, and in a way, I guess it was. I arrived 15 minutes early, wearing the same suit I'd worn yesterday, armor disguised as business casual. The board members filed in one by one, some I recognized from my father's parties, others new faces representing the consortium that had backed my acquisition. Sarah Chen sat to my right, legal documents stacked in front of her like ammunition. My father was late.
Of course he was.
Making an entrance had always been his style, even when he had nothing left to enter with. When he finally walked in, the room went quiet. He looked better than yesterday, more composed, like he'd spent the night preparing for battle. His eyes found mine across the table, and something passed between us. Not love, not hate, something more complicated than either. The board chairman, a silver-haired man named Douglas Warren, called the meeting to order. We're here to vote on the transfer of controlling shares and subsequent leadership change at Whitfield Global. Mr. Whitfield, you have the floor for any final statements. My father stood, and I braced myself for the performance. He'd always been good at speeches, at making people believe whatever story served him best. But when he spoke, his voice was quieter than I expected. 20 years ago, I built this company from nothing. I sacrificed everything for it.
My time.
My health. My family. His eyes flickered to me. I thought I was teaching my daughter about strength, about survival, about what it takes to succeed in this world. He paused, his composure cracking. I was wrong. The room held its breath. Even I wasn't expecting this. I left Emma in Bangkok because I thought she was weak, thought she needed to be tested, pushed, broken down, and rebuilt. But she wasn't the weak one. His voice dropped. I was. I was so terrified of losing control, of being vulnerable, that I pushed away the one person who might have actually helped me build something worth keeping. Douglas cleared his throat. Mr. Whitfield, while we appreciate your candor, the vote still needs to proceed. I know, my father said. I'm not asking for mercy. I'm asking for one thing. He looked directly at me. That you don't make my mistakes. That you run this company with the integrity I never had. That you be better than I ever was. He sat down, and the room erupted in whispered conversations. Sarah leaned over, her voice barely audible. That was unexpected. Yeah, I whispered back, my throat tight. It was. The vote was unanimous. Controlling shares transferred. Richard Whitfield removed as CEO. Emma Whitfield appointed as his replacement, effective immediately. It should have felt triumphant. Instead, it just felt necessary. Like setting a bone that had been broken too long. Painful, but essential for any kind of healing. After the board members filed out, my father remained seated. I walked over slowly, unsure what to say to the man who'd raised me and ruined me in equal measure. Congratulations, he said, not looking at me. You won. This isn't about winning, I said quietly. Isn't it? He finally met my eyes. You took everything from me, Emma. Everything I built. Everything I was. No, I said firmly. I took a company that was dying and gave it a chance to live. I took clients who were being exploited and gave them partnerships built on respect. I took your legacy and made it into something that won't end in criminal investigations and shame. I sat down across from him. I didn't take anything, Dad. I saved what you couldn't. He laughed bitterly. You make it sound noble. It wasn't noble. It was survival. You taught me that. I leaned forward. You left me with nothing. No money. No connections. No way home. You wanted me to prove myself?
Fine.
I did. But I proved that your way isn't the only way. That success doesn't require cruelty. That you can build something that lasts without destroying everyone around you. I thought I was making you stronger, he said quietly. You did, I admitted. Just not in the way you intended.
You didn't make me into you, Dad.
You made me into everything you're not. The silence stretched between us, heavy with things we'd never say and apologies that would never come. Finally, he stood, gathering the remnants of his dignity. What happens now? He asked.
Now.
I considered. Now I rebuild. I keep the employees who want to stay. I restore relationships you damaged. I turn Whitfield Global into Whitfield Reimagined, a company that actually lives up to its name. I paused. And you? You figure out who you are when you're not defined by power. He looked at me like I was a stranger. You really did it. Became someone I don't recognize. Good, I said softly. The person you would recognize doesn't exist anymore. You killed her in Bangkok. And honestly, I'm grateful.
She was weak.
She needed your approval to breathe. This version of me. I stood, meeting his eyes. This version doesn't need anything from you anymore. He left without another word, walking out of the company he'd built, the legacy he'd destroyed, the daughter he'd underestimated. I watched him go and felt nothing but exhausted relief. Sarah appeared at my elbow. That was intense. That was necessary, I corrected.
Come on.
We have a company to save. The press conference that afternoon was brutal. Reporters threw questions like grenades, asking about my father's crimes, about my role in his downfall, about whether this was revenge dressed as business. I answered each question calmly, professionally, steering the narrative away from family drama and toward the future. Whitfield Global lost its way. Under new leadership, we'll prioritize ethical partnerships, sustainable growth, and rebuilding trust with the communities we serve. This isn't about the past. It's about making sure we have a future worth building. One reporter, a young woman in the front row, raised her hand. Miss Whitfield, your father claims you orchestrated his downfall out of spite. Is there any truth to that? I took a breath, choosing my words carefully. My father made his own choices. I simply chose not to repeat his mistakes. If that cost him everything, maybe everything he had was built on the wrong foundation. I paused. I don't regret what I did. I regret that it had to happen this way. But sometimes the only way to save something is to tear it down and rebuild it from scratch. That's what I'm doing here. The press conference ended, and I walked back to the office that used to be his. The nameplate on the door still read, Richard Whitfield, CEO. I took it down, holding the cold metal in my hands, feeling the weight of everything it represented. Tomorrow, a new nameplate would go up. Not Emma Whitfield, just EW Reimagined. Because this wasn't about my name or his legacy. It was about building something that mattered, something that would outlast both of us. As I sat in the chair behind his desk, looking out at the New York skyline, I thought about the girl crying in a Bangkok cafe, wondering how she'd survive. I wished I could tell her that survival wasn't the goal. Transformation was. That the pain she was feeling would forge her into someone unstoppable. That being abandoned was the best thing that ever happened to her. My phone buzzed. A message from Ananda. Proud of you. Come home soon. Home. Bangkok. The city that had saved me, taught me, made me into someone who could walk back into my father's world and remake it completely. I would go back.
Soon.
3 months after taking control of Whitfield Global, I stood in a courthouse watching my father's world collapse in slow motion. The tax fraud trial had dragged on for weeks, every day bringing new revelations about offshore accounts, falsified documents, payments to officials that made even hardened prosecutors wince. I attended every session, sitting in the gallery where he could see me, a silent witness to the consequences he'd spent years outrunning. He looked older each day. Thinner. The expensive suits couldn't hide the way he diminished, shrinking into himself like a plant denied sunlight. His lawyers fought hard, but there's no defending the indefensible. The evidence was overwhelming. Years of fraud. Dozens of victims. Millions in stolen money. My testimony came on a Wednesday. The The prosecutor called me to the stand, and I walked past my father without looking at him, feeling his eyes burn into my back. I swore to tell the truth, sat down, and faced the questions I'd been dreading for months. Miss Whitfield, were you aware of your father's illegal activities? No, I said honestly. I was an employee, not a partner. He kept the illegal parts of the business hidden from me. When did you first become aware of the fraud? When I was in Thailand, I said. Investors started reaching out to me, telling me about broken promises and missing money. I started investigating, and that's when I realized how deep the corruption went. The prosecutor nodded. And you chose to work with those investors rather than protect your father. Why? I looked at my father then, really looked at him, and saw something I hadn't expected. Not anger, not even hatred, just exhaustion. Like he was finally tired of running from himself. Because protecting him would have meant becoming him, I said quietly. And I decided a long time ago that I'd rather be homeless and honest than rich and corrupt. The defense attorney cross-examined me, trying to paint me as a vengeful daughter who destroyed her father's reputation out of spite. I answered each question calmly, truthfully, letting the facts speak for themselves. I hadn't destroyed anything. I'd simply refused to be complicit in his destruction of others. The judge's verdict came 2 weeks later. Guilty on all counts. 5 years in federal prison. Restitution to victims. Permanent ban from holding any executive position. I wasn't in the courtroom when they read the verdict. I was in my office, finalizing the paperwork for Whitfield Reimagine's first major initiative, a mentorship program for young women entrepreneurs, particularly those from underprivileged backgrounds. Everything my father had never been, everything I wished I'd had when I was younger. Sarah called with the news. It's over, Emma. He's going to prison. I should have felt vindicated, triumphant. Instead, I just felt tired. How long? 5 years. Could be less with good behavior. And the restitution? Bankruptcy. He'll lose everything.
The house.
The savings. All of it. I hung up and stared at the Manhattan skyline, feeling nothing but a strange, hollow relief. It was over. The man who'd left me stranded in a foreign country, who tested me by breaking me, was finally facing consequences for his actions. Not just toward me, but toward everyone he'd hurt in his climb to the top. That evening, Nok video called from Bangkok. I heard, she said simply. How are you feeling? Honestly, I considered. Empty. Like I've been carrying this weight for so long that now that it's gone, I don't know what to do with the space it left behind. Fill it with something better, she said. That's what you're good at. Taking empty spaces and making them beautiful. She was right. Over the next weeks, I threw myself into the work. Whitfield Reimagined launched to surprising acclaim. The mentorship program accepted its first class of participants, 20 young women from all backgrounds, all hungry to build something meaningful. I brought in Ananda as a consultant, flew him to New York to teach what he'd taught me about ethical business. The company's reputation slowly shifted. Articles stopped talking about the scandal and started talking about the transformation, about how a company built on exploitation had been reimagined into something that actually helped people. My father's first letter from prison arrived on a Tuesday. I stared at the envelope for an hour before opening it, unsure if I wanted to know what he had to say. Finally, curiosity won. The letter was short, only a few paragraphs. But every word felt heavy with things he'd never been able to say face to face. Emma, I'm writing this from a place I never imagined I'd end up. I have a lot of time to think here. About my choices. About what I lost. About who I became. I want to say I'm sorry, but those words feel insufficient for what I did to you. Abandoning you in Bangkok wasn't a test. It was cruelty. I told myself it was about making you stronger, but the truth is, I was terrified of you becoming stronger than me. Of you not needing me anymore. Turns out my biggest fear came true anyway. You became someone I could never be. Someone with integrity. Someone people actually respect, not just fear. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that watching you transform my company into something good, something that actually helps people, it's the only thing that makes this bearable. Maybe my legacy won't be what I built. Maybe it will be what you built from the wreckage I left behind. I'm proud of you, Emma. I should have said that years ago. Before everything. Before I destroyed us both trying to prove something that was never worth proving. Your father. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face, feeling a complicated mix of anger and grief, and something that might have been the beginning of forgiveness. Not for him.
For me.
Because carrying that anger was exhausting, and I had better things to do with my energy. I didn't write back. Not yet. Maybe someday. Maybe never. The choice was mine now, and that was enough. Months later, at the mentorship program's first graduation ceremony, I stood in front of 20 young women who'd built businesses from nothing but determination and support. Women who reminded me of the girl I'd been in Bangkok, scared and alone but refusing to quit. You don't need permission to be powerful, I told them. You don't need anyone's approval to build something meaningful. You just need to believe that you're worth betting on. Because I promise you, if you bet on yourself, you'll never lose. You might struggle. You might fail. You might get knocked down so hard you forget what standing felt like. But if you keep getting up, if you keep building, if you keep believing that you deserve success built on integrity instead of exploitation, you'll create something that actually matters. They applauded, and I saw myself in their eyes. The girl who'd been abandoned. The woman who'd survived. The entrepreneur who'd transformed pain into purpose. That night, alone in my apartment with Bangkok photos on the walls and a company I'd built with my own hands, I finally let myself feel it. Not just the success. Not just the victory. But the peace of knowing I'd become exactly who I was meant to be. Not despite my father's cruelty. Not even because of it. But in spite of everything, I'd chosen myself. Chosen integrity. Chosen to build something that would outlast all of us. And that was the real victory. Have you ever turned pain into power? How did you do it? The visit came on a gray March afternoon, 9 months after my father went to prison, and I began building a new life. My assistant's hesitant voice broke through my focus. Emma, your father's here. My hand froze. I should have said no. But instead I said, give me 5 minutes. When he entered, escorted by a guard, I barely recognized him. Gray, thin, tired. The man who once terrified entire rooms now looked human. Emma, he said, voice rough. Thank you for seeing me. I stayed behind my desk, the empire I'd rebuilt standing proudly around me. You've got 20 minutes. What do you want? He glanced around the office. Photos of our mentorship graduates, our mission statement, the proof of everything I'd transformed. This isn't the company I built, he said. No, I replied. It's better. Yours was built on fear. Mine's built on respect. He flinched but didn't argue. I was wrong about everything, about success, about you. I know, I said quietly. He didn't ask for forgiveness, and I didn't offer it. Hate takes energy, I told him. I'd rather build than destroy. You've grown wise, he murmured. I had to, I said. You taught me abandonment. I learned survival. I learned how to build power without cruelty. We sat in the silence of everything unsaid. When he finally asked, do you still hate me? I answered honestly. No. You showed me who I didn't want to be. That's the most valuable lesson you ever taught me. Something in him broke then, not anger, just surrender. You're stronger than I'll ever be. I know, I said. Not because of what you did, but because of what I did with it. He nodded toward the mentorship program. That's everything I wasn't. Yes, I said. I help people because others once helped me. You never taught me that. I had to learn it elsewhere. The officer announced 5 minutes left. My father stood slowly. Could you ever see me as your dad again? I turned to him, the man who'd once left me broken in Bangkok. I don't know. Maybe someday. Maybe never. But I'm done waiting for that answer. I have a company to run and a life to live. He accepted that. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you, he said softly. I read your letter, I told him. But I'm not ready to write back. Healing happens on my time, not yours. Will you at least send business updates? Quarterly reports only, I said. His faint smile told me that even that small gesture meant everything. Before leaving, he looked around one last time. You were right. I left you to break you. But you didn't break. You became everything I was too afraid to be. Go serve your time, I told him. Maybe then you'll learn who you are without power. He left, and the door closed softly. My assistant buzzed in. You okay? Yeah, I said, meaning it for the first time. I really am. That night, I called Ananda in Bangkok. He came to see me, I said. And I told him the truth that I don't hate him, but I don't need him either. I think he finally saw what he lost. How do you feel? Free, I said. Free from proving anything to him. Ananda smiled. Then you've succeeded. Not in business, but in becoming yourself. I learned that from you. No, he said. You learned it from yourself. Later, I opened my laptop, not for business, but to write my story. I called it Asterisk, the girl who got left behind and came back stronger. Asterisk. It went viral overnight. Comments poured in from people who'd been abandoned, broken, underestimated, people finding hope in survival and transformation. One message stood out. My father fired me because he said I wasn't strong enough. Your story made me realize maybe being left behind means being pushed towards something better. I replied, Asterisk, you're not behind. You're exactly where you need to be. Build something beautiful. I believe in you. Asterisk. Because that's what I'd learned in Bangkok, through every scar and every triumph, that being left behind isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of the one where you become your own hero. My father thought abandoning me would break me. Instead, it made me, not into his legacy, but into myself. When he came home and saw what I'd built from his ruins, the regret in his eyes said it all. The girl he left behind didn't stay lost. She came back stronger, wiser, unstoppable. She came back and built something that mattered. She came back and won, not through revenge, but through transformation. Thank you for watching Emma's incredible journey from abandonment to triumph. If her story inspired you, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next powerful story. Have you ever been underestimated by someone you loved? Tell us how you proved them wrong. And if someone you know needs this reminder, share it. Because being abandoned isn't the end. It's the beginning of the story where you finally become who you were meant to be. See you in the next story. Keep fighting.
Keep building.
Keep becoming.